Tony! Tony! Tony!
Hello, sir.
O'Neill phoned me, told me you'd be out at 6.
O'Neill?
Yeah, sure, the district attorney's an old friend of mine. I asked him to do me a favor, and here you are. You're late, but free.
There was a mix-up. They lost some papers.
Oh, well, I got worried about you. What's the matter, kid? Tony, look at me.
I'd like a drink.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Yossi Yamin, who is the co-founder and CEO of SpacePharma. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Scott. Nice meeting you.
So, Yossi, you've been in the space industry for almost 3 decades, including commanding the Israeli satellite unit. Can you share a little bit more about your experience?
Experience started with a lot of intelligence tasks, as well as challenges to secure the state of Israel from threats and a lot of Earth observation from orbit. We did it with a nice pre-selected recruiting process of teenagers that after accomplished their STEM studies, joined the unit, and together we developed the software, the hardware, and the operational concept of the systems in orbit. So that's the beginning of my journey in orbit. And when I retired as a lieutenant colonel from the IDF, the intelligence corps, I decided to take these lessons and to convert those to the real economy of medicine in orbit and real economy of new space technologies that currently are all around us. But 8 years ago, it sounds like a really big science fiction.
Fascinating. And of course, the unit that you commanded is one of the more elites. And to your point, you guys recruit early and really get the most promising young students into these programs for advanced satellite missions. As you kind of look back at your career and saw some of the opportunities, I think one of the opportunities you saw was this notion of microgravity, and microgravity in particularly how that applies to everything from molecular biology to cancer research to just general research and even lab work. How did that translate into what you're doing today as pertains to SpacePharma?
The motivation as we started from the beginning was to shrink as much as we can the hardware, the conservative hardware, hoods, microscopes, and additional labware to fit into a very limited size shoebox size that can be recognized as a payload and can be installed within a CubeSat. The reason for that was to make it affordable, so to share the cost of the launch with many clients and to survive the experiment in orbit remotely controlled without an astronaut. This is a huge challenge because, as you know, big states or nations, consortiums can lift heavy weight, while if you want to send up a new technology, it is very expensive to lift for a startup tons or hundreds of kilograms or pounds to orbit. So we decide to go against the stream and to shrink to minimal size dimension, liquid handling, as well as droplet management in orbit. And that can suit every molecule on Earth. Means every reaction, every process can be run in orbit remotely, while you carry to orbit droplets filled with compounds, stem cells, antibiotics, as well as bacteria. And this is the fascinating world where you can treat it remotely without risking the people. On the other hand, keep the cost very affordable to the clients.
All right, so we're going to come back to this notion of miniaturization and the components that goes into this, essentially like this kit in a box, effectively. But just to kind of put it into context, when we think about wet labs and research labs, biological labs, these are very large facilities, and oftentimes they're very specialized equipment. And here we're talking about really miniaturizing in such a way that it's everything is self-contained in this tiny little unit. But just to kind of set the context a little bit better is that based on our research, our understanding is that I guess when astronauts are sent to the ISS, there are a specific set of objectives or tasks that they have to perform on the space station. And also, furthermore, they may not be necessarily chemists or biologists, and they may not be trained as lab scientists who can do some of these lab experiments. So one of the issues that I think we read about is that there's some 300 applications for space station experiments that are submitted to the US Space Agency, but really only 10% or less actually ends up getting fulfilled. And is that really the area that SpacePharma is trying to address? Is this unmet need?
This is a partial of the unmet need. It is absolutely true that the time crew reserved mainly for security, health check, and then maintenance of the station. But we believe that many opportunities are missing because you try to fit the experiment to the crew, to the astronauts. And as you mentioned before, the astronaut is not the scientist, is not the medical doctor. There are a few who hold a PhD at chemistry or physics, but this is not enough because researchers are spending years, decades on learning and studying a very significant point of cancer relief, mRNA treatment, protein crystallizations. Those issues are very complex to run by someone as an astronaut. And for that reason, we preferred, first of all, to fit in more cases into any spacecraft. It could be the space station. It could be a complementary to the space station, like a small CubeSat. It could be a mini shuttle. That are many now expected in the near future from Sierra Nevada Corporation, like the Dream Chaser, the X-37B. There are a few others from Europe, like the Space Rider, the Dragon, of course, and Axiom is coming again to the stage with another spacecraft. So all those can carry our labs. But imagine that instead of having 6 astronauts running an experiment or a sophisticated procedure to study drug disease modeling or drug development, now you have 1,000 researchers holding a joystick and remotely control it. You run 160 times more executions than the astronauts in orbit. You can have peer review. You can have scientific results that can be shared between continents, and to run 24/7 research remotely. And this is the story that we would like to address.
It's so novel, and it's this notion of, in this case, miniaturization, but the dematerialization, and also removing the physical specialized experts from actually physically doing it, but remotely doing it. And just to get into a little bit of the details a little bit, is that this lab in a box effectively has a few centimeters large 3D printed silicon chips, and has test tubes as well as connected by pipes, and these are then conducting experiments around bacteria cultures, DNA molecules, skin tissues, chemicals, all in these tiny doses. Can you talk a little bit more about the kind of sensors and capabilities, as well as some of the limitations of what this essentially lab in a box can or cannot do? And how robust is the communication in terms of ability for the clients to be able to, maintain that communication, that connectivity to control it from the terrestrial Earth?
You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
So within the lab, the most used sensors are the spectrometry readers, the spectrometer, the fluorescence fluorometer as well. The electro-optical are barely used. The streaming is barely used because we cannot provide a very deep, enlarged magnification of the models, but still we take imagery inside. Then the communication are done only 6 times a day. We have our ground station at Switzerland with the ITU frequency reserved for SpacePharma, so we can downstream the telemetry directly to the clients, let them analyze it, and then intervene and change parameters on board the SPAD, which is our system, the little cube lab. It is true that we are trying to push the liquid handling into a lab on a chip, organ on a chip technology, which is even a shrinker technology than the lab itself. This is another challenge, but within it we can provide sensing capabilities like glucose, pH, temperature, radiation. Of course, we provide a radiation tag for every reaction, so the clients know within the steps executed by him what was the radiation in orbit while it was performed. So that will allow him to distinguish what is real microgravity behavior and what is most probably related to radiation or other impacts that coming from the outside of the interior of the box. And that's what we provide. We have our own non-pulsation syringe pumps. As far as if you have a liquid running inside the system, you cannot allow air bubbles to interrupt because that will stop the system of working. So we need to take care about all of that. We have our housekeeping crew on Earth as well that take care about the solar panels, that they need to verify that we are acquiring enough power from the sun. And when the execution of the experiment is starting, all the system must be in a very aligned position. It's called XYZ, non-tumbling. So because if the system will tumble in orbit, you create an internal G and you ruin the experiment. And we are taking care about that. So the scientists should focus and practice the execution only without paying attention to the housekeeping of the entire system.
All right, so there's a lot to cover there, and I wish we had a little bit more time because I'm interested in terms of the kind of you mentioned spectrometer types of data, high image data, for instance, as well as some of the diagnostic aspects. We could go into that, but we don't really have that much time. Can you talk a little bit about why is it important to conduct these experiments in space? And you start to get into the XYZ axis in terms of the fact that certain things, for example, on Earth, there's limitation in terms of how we can grow or look at things on a 3-dimensional fashion. How does microgravity, low gravity allow for some of these things?
First of all, there are a few kind of forces. Those are not really forces, no shear forces, no dissemination and no convection in orbit. So everything is on a peaceful manner. And if you would like the reaction to start, you need to help it to be done. So you need to push it. So you need to merge kind of liquids. And that will allow, for example, to grow better crystals in orbit, or to misfold proteins that we cannot stop them from misfolding here on Earth. And those behaviors are very unique to microgravity. So if you're trying to grow a small molecule that are smaller than certain size, I cannot tell the size, although we have the patent on that, they will not grow on Earth. They will stop growing. It's like to have a kind of a tree that can grow up to, let's say, 6 meter or something like that. But in orbit, the same tree can grow to 50 meter. So how it's come? Most probably because of the lack of gravity. So we know today that a small molecule can be grown 6 to 8 times higher, much more purified, much more clearer than on Earth. And then when you take it back to Earth, for example, you can use those as a seed for another few more generations. And that will allow you to increase the volume on Earth. This is one thing. Another thing is that we can learn about tissue cultures in logic. If you take a biopsy from a body, you can run diagnosis on a 3D. While you take it on Earth, you put it in a petri dish, it's smashed to the ground, it's not the same. Everything is stiffed by layers, and it is very difficult to understand where, what is the real problem of the cancer tumor, for example. So if you take the same tumor to orbit, you can manipulate it in a 3D process. You can run it a few times to take statistics, for example, and run a drug screening to defeat this cancer, because inside the body, everything is in a 3D. Nothing is by layers. And this is those are two examples of the beauty of learning about microgravity.
So I want to go back to one of the examples you discussed, which is this notion of being able to actually create new types of molecules, let's say, something that would be in support of pharmaceutical, and that can be used as a seed once it is then, the box basically gets retrieved back on Earth. How is that able to maintain that shape and form once it gets into a gravitational situation? Or is it really more the data that the researchers are able to capture?
Don't forget to visit astroperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars; Damian Vaughn, former NFL player; Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astroperkins.com and click on Events.
We are doing it in two directions. One is the telemetry down, which is data only, but it is not enough. But when we re-enter back the solid polymorphs to Earth, actually we are moving from a liquid phase to solid phase. And this is how we keep it, because solid will stay solid. But at the end, within the pharmaceutical process, you need to grain these solid structures, which came like a little bubble or little balls, and you smash them in a mixer, and then you take the best seeds for the seeding process. That's how it taken place. But moving from liquid to solid phase will survive those crystals.
Understood. That makes perfect sense now. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, because some of the results, tangible results from some of these experiments, because you have had a number of payloads that's gone into space. If you could talk about the example of, let's say, for example, Merck, Amgen, as well as maybe some of the things that Target's working on with cotton.
I can talk about things that are results that happened within our Cube Lab, recently launched to orbit, known as DIDO3. It's a Cube Lab, means CubeSat 3.8U in it, 2U lab. We executed the bacteria against antibiotic, and we could, for the first time in the world, could distinguish the conjugation, which is the communication between plasmids of two communities of bacteria. And when you know how to listen to this communication between the bacteria, you know how to defeat them by improving antibiotics. As you know, antibiotics wasn't improved, I think, around for the last 32 years. And now it could be the next pandemic, not only COVID-19 can attack us, but also bacteria, which is something different. It's a creature, but you need to know how to listen and how to react and how to defeat it once it will come into an aggressive position. We know that in orbit, bacteria are much more virulent and behave better due to different stress that happen, by the way, by the lack of gravity. And we are measuring that, and now we know how to improve antibiotics against specific kind of bacteria, known as E. coli, which are all around us, and to be better prepared to another pandemic. Hopefully it will not come. So this is within our system. I can tell you about the other success stories. For example, Merck took the Keytruda to orbit around 13 times, and they wanted to learn how to provide the drug delivery to the body in a different manner. Means instead of having it as an infusion, so the patient need to drive to the hospital, be under hospital care with all the expenses, the reimbursement of the insurance, and so on. They wanted to find another way to inject it into the body, and they convert the molecule to be subcutaneous, means injected to the body at a home care. So they increased the market of the Keytruda. On the other hand, they did not risk the patients to go to the hospital due to COVID-19, for example. And you know, when you get the shot at your comfortable zone, most probably it's half of the treatment. So we know today that monoclonal antibodies can be easily converted for a subcutaneous way to deliver it to the body instead of being infused in the hospital. So those are significantly two technologies that come from orbit. You could not get those without being in orbit. And the monoclonal antibody market, by many consulting groups, is supposed to be around 130, 150 billion US dollar annually. And if only 10% or even 1% will go to a little startup like SpacePharma, I think it's enough.
Yeah. So we only have about a minute left. So my last question, and this is more of a business question for you, is that our understanding of your business monetization model is that in exchange for these services in space, that you are taking a fraction of the royalties that could be derived from the discovery of some of these types of promising drugs and other applications. Is that true? And can you elaborate, please?
The monetization concept of SpacePharma is trying to escape the service model. The service model is not enough. You can survive on it, but you cannot increase the value of the company for the shareholders and to grow dramatically. Therefore, what we are now dealing with is trying to take a coupon, so to be like a kind of a technology partners of a nice stake within the new technology that we provide to the clients, and by that we can sell those holdings in the future. Therapeutics and go to market for the pharmaceutical takes longer still, although there is the fast track by the FDA, some MOU between NASA and the FDA. We prefer to hold some stakeholding on the technology and to build a new company around the technology that we were part of the development. This is one kind of monetization. Another thing is that we believe that additional to the pharmaceuticals, like polymers that can go to orbit, convert to anti-aging, longevity, regenerative medicine, can be easily access to the market or faster way to the market. And by that, we are trying to build new initiative with the consortium, either few scientists, another startup, or big pharma who would like to bring disruptive technology or to hold a disruptive technology. Those are the three monetization concepts that we are dealing with, because the service model alone, it's not enough.
Understood. So we are out of time for today. So I've been joined by Yossi Yamin, who is the CEO of SpacePharma. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you very much, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.